It happened again. Jake Harper stood at the entrance of his barn, staring at the glossy white SUV parked right in the middle of his hay storage, the ridiculous Karen vanity plate gleaming under the afternoon sun. His right eye twitched. He took a slow, deep breath, willing himself to calm down. Not again. Not this time. A light breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass, and somewhere in the distance, his cows let out a few low moos, oblivious to the injustice unfolding on their land. He reached for the barn door, yanked it open, and stared inside. Nothing had been moved, except for the towering audacity of his neighbor, who had once again claimed his barn as her personal parking garage. Jake pinched the bridge of his nose. He had warned her. Multiple times. But no, Karen always had an excuse. The first time she did this, it was just for a few hours while she went into town. The second time, she claimed her driveway was being sealed, and she had nowhere else to go. The third time, she had the nerve to say his barn had better shade, and she didn't want her leather seats getting too hot. And now? Now there was a note taped to his barn door. Jake, I'll pick it up Monday. Don't touch my car. It's new, and I don't want dust on it. He read it twice, blinking in disbelief. Monday? It was Friday. She had parked her fancy SUV in his barn and planned to leave it there for the entire weekend like it was a reserved spot at the Ritz-Carlton. Jake clenched his jaw so hard his teeth ached. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over Karen's contact. But then, something stopped him. He knew exactly how this would go. He would call her, and she'd answer in that high-pitched, faux apologetic tone, acting surprised like it was an oopsie moment. Then she'd sweet-talk him into letting it slide. Again. Not this time. Jake looked at the heavy barn doors, then at the padlock hanging nearby. An idea formed in his mind, slow and sweet, like honey dripping from a spoon. He grabbed the padlock, swung the barn doors shut, and secured the lock with a satisfying click. Then, whistling a tune under his breath, he strolled toward his truck, tossing his weekend bag in the back. He had planned a fishing trip, and suddenly, the idea of being completely unreachable for the next 2 days sounded even better. By the time he was halfway down the road, his phone buzzed. Karen. He let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call. He grinned and turned up the radio. By the time he reached the highway, she had called 5 times. An hour later, she had called 12 times. And by the time he reached his cabin by the lake, his voicemail was full of escalating rage messages that went something like this. Hey Jake, it's Karen. I just noticed you locked my car in your barn. Haha, funny joke. Call me when you get this. Okay, seriously? I need my car. Unlock the barn. Jacob Harper, I know you're ignoring me. You better get back here right now. You think this is cute? You are committing a crime. I will call the police. He took a sip of his beer, feet propped up on the dock, watching the sunset over the water. He couldn't remember the last time he felt this peaceful. The weekend passed in pure bliss. No Karen. No drama. No entitled demands. Just the sound of nature, the occasional fish biting, and the knowledge that somewhere, Karen was losing her mind. By the time Monday rolled around, he was almost sad to leave. Almost. He pulled into his driveway to find chaos waiting for him. Karen was standing outside the barn, pacing like a caged lion, her arms flailing as she yelled into her phone. Next to her, a police car sat parked on the gravel, a bored-looking officer leaning against the hood, arms crossed. As soon as Jake stepped out of his truck, Karen charged toward him, face redder than a sunburned tomato. There he is. Arrest him, she screeched, pointing an accusing finger. Jake blinked. For what? For stealing my car. The officer let out a sigh, rubbing his temples. Ma'am, we already went over this. Your car is inside his barn. That's private property. He didn't steal anything. He locked it in there. That's theft. Jake looked at the officer. So let me get this straight. I locked my own barn, which is on my own land, and now I'm being accused of a crime. The officer's lips twitched, like he was trying not to smile. Jake pulled out his phone and opened his security footage app. I have video proof she parked there without permission. Also, here's her note. He handed over the crumpled paper. The officer took one look at it and exhaled through his nose. Ma'am, this proves you left your car here voluntarily. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. But it was just supposed to be for a little while. Jake crossed his arms. You wrote Monday. Today is Monday. The officer coughed into his fist, clearly hiding a laugh. Technically, he did exactly what you said. He didn't touch your car. Karen's face went through 6 shades of rage before she settled on self-righteous fury. This is harassment. I'll sue. Jake smirked. Go ahead. Trespassing laws are pretty clear in this county. Karen let out a strangled noise, turned on her heel, and stormed toward the barn, yanking on the lock. Unlock it. Now. Jake took his sweet time, unlocking the padlock with a casual hum. The moment the doors swung open, Karen dove for her car, yanking open the driver's door, only to find something waiting for her inside. A family of raccoons had taken up residence over the weekend. One of them hissed. Karen let out a blood-curdling scream and fell backward into a pile of hay, flailing like an upturned turtle. Jake wheeze-laughed, doubling over, hands on his knees. The officer lost the battle and let out a full snort of amusement. Karen scrambled to her feet, covered in hay and indignation, shrieking, "You will pay for this!" Jake wiped away a tear. Nah. I think we're even. She stomped into her car, slammed the door, and sped off, leaving behind a cloud of dust and what was left of her dignity. The officer clapped Jake on the shoulder. That was the funniest thing I've seen in years. Have a good day, Mr. Harper. Jake watched Karen's SUV disappear down the road, then turned back toward his peaceful, Karen-free barn. Finally. Silence. Jake woke up Monday morning feeling more refreshed than he had in years. His weekend at the lake had been nothing short of perfect. No calls, no stress, just nature and the satisfaction of knowing Karen was back home fuming. The only thing sweeter than catching a base was knowing his barn had been locked tight with her precious SUV inside. He stretched, yawned, and made himself a strong cup of coffee, savoring the quiet before heading back to reality. But as soon as he pulled into his driveway, reality hit him in the form of flashing red and blue light. Karen stood outside the barn, her arms flailing wildly as she argued with a police officer. The officer looked exhausted, as if he had been listening to the same rant for hours. Karen, on the other hand, was full of energy, her face red with rage as she pointed toward the barn like she was presenting evidence in a high-profile trial. The moment she spotted Jake's truck, she turned on her heel and stormed toward him, nearly tripping over her own feet in the process. "There he is!" she shrieked, voice cracking from overuse. "That's the man who stole my car." Jake parked, stepped out, and casually took a sip of his coffee, letting the moment linger. "Morning, officer," he greeted, ignoring Karen's murderous glare. The officer gave a tired nod. "Mr. Harper, this woman claims you locked her vehicle inside your barn against her will." Jake took another sip, savoring the moment. "Well, I did lock my barn," he admitted. "But her vehicle? I didn't put it there." "She did." Karen threw her hands in the air. "It doesn't matter. He kept me from accessing my property. That's a crime." The officer pinched the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, did you park your car in his barn without his permission?" Karen's mouth opened and closed, her mind desperately trying to twist the situation in her favor. "That's not the point. He should have called me before locking it." Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out the note she had left on his barn door. "You said, and I quote, 'I'll pick it up Monday. Don't touch my car.'" He handed the paper to the officer. "I followed her instructions perfectly." The officer read it, his lips twitching as if he wanted to laugh but knew he shouldn't. He turned back to Karen, who had suddenly gone silent. "Ma'am, this note makes it pretty clear you left your car here voluntarily." Karen's face twisted into something ugly. He knew I didn't mean leave it locked inside. No reasonable person would do that. Jake leaned against his truck. No reasonable person would treat someone else's barn like a public parking lot either. Karen let out a frustrated scream and stomped over to the barn doors, rattling them aggressively. Well, since you're back, open it. Jake took his sweet time retrieving the key. He made sure to stretch, adjust his hat, and finish the last sip of coffee before unlocking the padlock and swinging the doors open. The moment he did, Karen lunged for her SUV, yanking the driver's door open, and then promptly let out a blood-curdling shriek that echoed across the farm. Inside her car, nestled in the passenger seat, was a fat, grumpy raccoon blinking at the sudden invasion of light. It took one look at Karen, let out a low hiss, and scrambled toward the back, knocking over an open bag of snacks she had left.